Well, good evening and welcome to this evening's webinar, Back to School with the TI84 Plus Family Part 1. My name is Rodney Anderson. I'll be your host for tonight's webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to view at a later date via on-demand along with the panelist documents. During the webinar, if you wish to ask a question or provide some chat, you'll move your mouse to the top middle of your screen and you'll find a toolbar that will drop down. Click on the corresponding chat icon, and when you actually input your question or comment, please send it to the host, which is myself, and I'll actually talk to Jim and John during the evening, and we hope to have many of you participants to actually ask questions and provide chat, and we'll respond to your comments and questions as soon as we can. Now, after the webinar, it's very important that you provide some feedback to the Texas Instruments Australia. This will allow improvements to the webinar program, any improvements to the sessions during the evening, so they can continue improvement of the sessions. In the next 48 hours, as you see on the screen, there'll be an email sent to you, and there'll be links to resources provided by the two presenters tonight, and then one link for the webinar certificate you can use for your professional development for your hours for your individual state. One of the panellists is Jim Lowe from Queensland. He's actually with the Queensland University of Technology, as you see on the screen. He's been teaching longer than he can remember, and he's very passionate about, as you see, bringing mathematics and science to life through data logging. And the other presenter is John Beaumont from O'Loughlin Catholic College. He's, as you see there, is a technology fanatic, and he loves working with the TI Inspire and the 84 and uses his iPad a great deal with sessions, and has presented at conferences around Australia and T-Cube International. So I'd like John to start tonight's section of the program, and have a good night, Jim and John.
Thank you, Rodney. Thanks for the introduction. Good evening all. I'm just going to share my screen. And Rodney will tell me when you can see it. You see my screen, Rodney?
Just about there. There you go. You're on there now.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Well, good evening all, and welcome. As Rodney said, this webinar is aimed at TI84 Plus users, and mainly for teachers who are new, or even students for that matter, who are new to the TI84 family. When I say the TI84 family, I mean the TI84 Plus, which you can see on the screen here now, and the TI84 plus Siiii, which is the new colour version. And over tonight's webinar and tomorrow's webinar, both Jim and I will be using both and showing how the similarities between them and the additional extras that the Siiii now has to offer. Like Rodney said, please, we encourage you to participate, to ask questions. You can do that via the chat window, as Rodney said, if you move your cursor up to the top, and you can join the chat. Because really we want your questions answered, so that you get the maximum out of this webinar, and you learn a bit more, either if you've never picked one of these up before, or to reaffirm what you already know. So this is the TI SmartView Siiii. It's a new version which teachers who already have the license in their school for the 84 can get a free upgrade. Schools who book list the 84 Siiii can get a free version of the SmartView as well. And also you can get a trial version of it. And I'll just show you where that is. Here's the TI Australia website. And if you go to Products, Computer Software, there we go. And not only do we have the Inspire suite here and TI Connect, which we'll be talking about tomorrow in Part 2's webinar, but here's the TI SmartView Siiii. And here's the free trial, and here's the upgrade. And the main advantage of using this software, especially as a teacher, it obviously makes life easier to explain to the students what's going on, but they can see their screen, a similar screen on either the overhead projector or on the data projector, or however you normally show it in your classroom. But we can equally switch between the Siiii and the 84 Plus. While we're on this SmartView, I'll just talk about a few little extra things. that you're aware of these. We can also show a larger emulator, which will show the screen in a bigger size. All right. We can add a history line down the bottom, which will show us what the key presses are. This is a nice little feature. We can make it as big or as small as we like, as many lines, especially if you're doing something a little bit more technical, which we'll be talking about over the next couple of webinars. You may want students to follow this. And also, if you're wanting to do something, you can actually show more screens down through the side. So if we're doing, again, we'll show you later, if we're doing stuff with the graphing and the equations, if I press the refresh button here, then we'll see all those screens at the same time. And that can be quite powerful to see students to see the connection between both what the results they get, the graph they get, and what the equation was originally. Now this SmartView software can be used on both the Mac and the PC. And another nice feature is that as we press the buttons, you can see that they highlight in red so that we can see exactly what's going on. We can also, if you wanted to, move these icons up here down to the bottom. The only real advantage of that, I think, is if you were using an interactive whiteboard, then you'd be able to actually touch those for, if you weren't tall enough, to, unless you were like Rodney, who's a giant of a man. If you weren't tall enough, you could actually reach down the bottom to get those icons. So I won't use the history, and I won't use the view for now. I'll just stick to this screen. And I'll stick with the 84 for now. We can see that with the 84 and the Siiii, that the faceplate is exactly the same. All I've done here is change the color background, which I can do by the faceplate in view, and I've made it dark at the moment, but if I made it light, it would look like the other one. I've just done that to show you the difference, to make sure there's a difference between the two of them. But the actual buttons, their position, what they have on their buttons is exactly the same. So if you do have a class of a blend of calculators, both the 84 Plus and the 84 Plus Siiii, then it's no stress. There's just a few extra things that the 84 can do. As you can see, the main buttons, normally like most calculators, there's the normal set of suite of calculators down here, the buttons that I would see down here. Extra things that we'll be talking up in this upper section. And then you've got your second for all the blue ones. Most of the time they're the inverse of a lot of the buttons, which is quite a nice thing to explain to the students. And then also we use the alpha for letters. I'll show you how you can use those for storing variables, but also you would use that if you're going to be doing programming. One of the big things that you want to make sure that your students have is that they're all on the same operating system. The students have no problems in making sure their mobile phones or tablets are on the most up-to-date operating system, but also it's good that the calculators are, makes your life a lot easier. So to see what they're on, you go to Second, Memory, and click About. And this is the most up-to-date version for the 84 Plus. In tomorrow night's webinar, we'll show you how you can upgrade these. There obviously is online stuff as well. We'll talk about that tomorrow. There's the 2.55 MP, and MP stands for mass print, which I'll discuss in a minute what that exactly means. And if we just go to the Siiii so that you've got the same, then Second, Memory, About, and can we see that because of the greater pixels on the Siiii, how much more is available and how much cleaner it looks. And there again is the 5.10 and a few digits at the end. So these are the most up-to-date versions at the moment. So it's really important that both yourself, your SmartView, and the students' handhelds are all on the same version. So we'll just go second and quit that. So as I said to you, the mass print is a nice feature of the calculators these days, so that actually the students get to see how things are like they would in their textbook. So we can see that here's a power button, and it actually looks like that rather than the old-fashioned hat symbol, which is actually up there. Notice there's an arrow there, which means that if you do want to bring it back down, then you need to arrow down. You can obviously leave it up there to press enter, but if you're wanting to add something else, then you need to arrow down. I'll give you an example of that. 3 to the power of 4 plus 1. There we go, 82. Easy as that. We can also do square root.
Questions.
Yep.
Sorry, John. Can you go up and copy that line of questions possibly being asked? Can you actually go up and 3 to the exponent of 4 plus 1, can you copy that down easily?
You certainly can, and it's a lovely little feature. So, yeah, thanks for that, Rodney. I was going to talk about that. It's great to talk about now. Yeah, no, fantastic. Thank you. And like I said, please keep those questions coming through to Rodney, because it's great that we get your questions answered. Yeah, in the old days, all we had was second answer, and then you'd be able to do something with that. So that obviously is going to take the last answer and add 3. That's quite nice if you're looking at doing a sequence that we could do. But yeah, as Rodney said, if you had an equation in here, and sometimes quite complex numbers, or you're actually wanting to change something, yet you simply just scroll up, and when you hover over the one that you want to use, just press enter, and it will bring it back down. So a really nice feature, really nice, and saves a lot of time with students having to re-change things, so that maybe they wanted then to change that and add a bit more to it. So again, we could go into it and change that to a 4, and it works quite nicely. While we're on that, and thanks for that, Rodney, we can also do insert. Lots of times I think people forget that you can do insert. So to do insert, let's say that was actually supposed to be 14, then here's insert here, just above the delete, so it's in blue, second insert. We can now see that it's changed, 1, and there's the 14 now. Press enter. Thanks for that, Rodney. Is there anything else at the moment?
No questions, other questions at the moment.
Great, thank you. We can see that we have a straightforward square root here. And I always think it's interesting that we don't actually use a 2 in front of there. It would make my life a lot easier when I teach calculus if there was a 2 in front of there all the way through. But if you want to get the other ones, then they are in maths, and we can either use cube root, but here's the one that if we wanted to use for any root that we wanted is number 5. You can scroll down to find the one that you want, but I'm pretty lazy, and I'm just going to press the number 5. Notice that it's put ants there because it's taken this last number here. So there is a bit of syntax that the students need to remember. No major dramas, because we can go back to it and we can change it to a different number if we want to, so it's no big deal. And there we go. Very nicely done. Another nice feature of the new operating system that leads on from what Rodney said about copying down is that there's now these quick keys above F1 to F4. Now, it's not as easy to see it like this, so I'm just going to change my screen back to a slightly smaller view just for a minute. I'll hide that screen. But you can see that when I press alpha F1, we get all these tabs coming up underneath functions F1, 2, 3, and 4. Allows us to work with fractions much quicker. I'll show you that in a second. Moving across. Oh, sorry, wrong thing. Pressing F2. We can see we can do absolute, sum, we can do derivatives, integration, log to any base, rather than the old-fashioned way of having to do one base 10 on both and divide them. We can do a quick matrix, which we will be talking about in tomorrow's webinar. And if we want to get the y variables, much quicker way of getting them in here. So I'm just going to focus on the fraction one for a minute. So we can see this gives us a nice little template now to work with, just like equation editor on the Word. And we can now press it exactly like that. If we did want to turn it to a decimal, we can go through the quick function again, or in math also. Number 2, we'll turn it to a decimal, and we can get that nicely done as well. Let me just show you one other, alpha F2. Let's do the logs, number 5. And again, not thinking about which number.
Sorry, John, while you do that, I'm looking at your screen. I can see your Windows icon. Did you close your screen, the computer screen to your right? I need to minimize calculate the map. Sorry, I just missed that.
No, thanks, Rodney. Yeah, I did. I was just showing how it's hard to see when you have the emulator where those function buttons match up with the F1 to F4. So thanks for that. When we have it like that, I think that's the only thing when you have the emulator like this is a little bit confusing, is that you don't have those buttons directly above each other. So that's why I think it's just, if you explain to students where those are, and they quickly know where they are, you don't have to stress too much about that, then they're just there. But I will go back to that now. But thank you for that, Rodney. Nice to keeping me on my toes.
Well, keep me on toes. I just happen to look away.
Yeah. Another nice part that is the store function here. Not so much on a simple number, but I will use that for now. But any number that you have that you've got from in your normal calculator screen or even from the graph screen that Jim will show you later, if you press store, you can store it as any variable. I suggest to the students not to store it as X or Y. It's only a temporary store anyway, but those will get wiped over by other things. So it's much easier to just choose any other random letter. So I'm just going to choose E. And then if we went to 3E, we can see that it does 3 times the number that is stored. And students say to me, oh, but it's stored, it's stored. What do I do to clear it? You don't need to clear it. You can just leave it there because it's not going to impact on anything else that's going on, and it will just get wiped over when you do something else. If I now choose a different number, and now I store that one as E, and let's use what Rodney talked about earlier. Let's go up and copy this 3E now. Then it will change because it will now be 15 because it's 3 times this new number that's stored. So it's no big deal. Just talking about that, and Jim and I will both talk about troubleshooting techniques later on, but if you do want students to all be on the same page when you're teaching at the start, especially of a new school year, they may have got somebody else's calculator or somebody else who's been messing around with it. The simplest way to wipe their calculators and all be on exactly the same electronic page, so to speak, with all your windows and everything cleared out, is to go second memory and go reset number 7 and all RAM. And we'll click yes. And that will basically put it right back all to the fresh start. And that's probably the easiest way for teachers to just all have every student on the same page.
I agree too, John. It's very easy to do that, and students get in the habit of doing that.
Yeah.
And all together, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Probably the last thing for this section for now, so I'm just literally showing you just mainly the screen without doing too much more than what a normal calculator would do, is if you go into mode, there's some nice little functions in here now. It's mostly set in radians. Again, tomorrow we'll spend some more time on talking about how we can switch between the two and how we don't need to use these buttons all the time, but it's in radians most of the time. We can change it out of that. You can have a graph and table at exactly the same time, which is quite a nice function. I could scroll down. I think I can scroll up. There you go. And here's the math print that I talked to you about. So it gives all the calculations in a much nicer way. You can go back to the classic, but I'm not sure why you would. Equally, your fractions you can have in different forms, both as mixed numbers and top-heavy, and your answers as well in whatever format you want. Probably the only one in here that you'd want to encourage students to make sure that is on is the stat diagnostics. So on the old 84, before the new operating system, we used to have to go into catalog to find it. But here now, it's just in mode, and you'd want to make sure that your students have that on. That's mainly used to show the R-squared when you do some regression equations. Any other questions at the moment, Rodney?
No other questions at the moment, John. It's fantastic. While Jim's preparing for his next section of the webinar, it's like teachers and staff and students who are watching you get used to what's the icons around the edge of your screen and the calculator, so become very familiar with it. It's very important, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. I think that there's some really nice little features that the TI84 offers that can easily be overlooked, and it just makes everybody's life easier, students' answers more accurate, and it allows students to see the links between solutions much easier. It makes their life a lot easier, yeah. Over to you, Jim.
Thanks, Rodney. Thanks, John. You should have my screen coming through.
Yes, we
Basically
do.
where John left off with a TI84 plus showing on the screen. John's given you a very, very good introduction to the features of the 84, and I guess I get the easy part for tonight to talk about the graphing features. These sort of devices have been around for a long, long time and gone through a lot of different changes and I guess a lot of different names. They were called graphing calculators, graphical calculators and all sorts of things, and probably graphical calculators is a better name at the moment because they can do a lot more than just graph, but in many ways that was the original feature that they were introduced for. So let's just have a look at the graphing capabilities. Now, to be able to see a function and manipulate that function and check the changes in how it appears as a graph is a very, very powerful thing for students. And John showed you before how to get the three windows so that we get the three representations occurring together, the graphical, the tabular form, and the algebraic form of the graphs. But let's start off simple and just look at drawing a basic graph. And if that's a prime function of the calculator, it's something that should be quite easy for students and teachers to do, and it certainly is, because everything you need to do is basically on this top row right under the display. And so if we want to enter a graph, y equals, click on the button and we get that menu appearing on the screen and we can go through and enter our graphs. I'm using the 84 plus here, so let's take something like 2 times the variable x, and we'll add a constant just to get a linear function. I can press enter. I don't really need to. Pressing enter would just take me to the second function, y2 there, or I can just click on the graph button and it will go straight away and draw that graph for me on the standard screen. Excuse me. If we go back to the y equals and go down and enter a second function, let's look at something like, let's make it 3x. And we'll keep the intercept the same for the moment and go +3 again, press graph, and one graph's already drawn and it goes through and draws the other one. Now remember, this is the 84 plus. We have a monochrome screen, but we can still differentiate the two graphs so that we can point things out to students. If we go back to the y equals and take our first function here, or maybe the second one, and if we use the arrow keys to go back and across there, then you will notice that I start to get some changes happening there. Now I've gone the wrong way. What have I done to myself? Clicked the wrong button.
Press enter, Jim.
Okay. Sorry?
Press enter.
Yeah, I know what yeah. So you notice there we've got our lines changed to the thick line, which I personally don't like, especially on the 84 plus with a slightly less finely resolved graphics. We get the shading for greater than or less than. This thing seems to be running slow at the moment. We can have, and I'm waiting for it to come up with the dots. That's the one I wanted. So now having that representation, I can go and we get a slightly different appearance there, that we've got something at least that if you're using this as a display on a data projector in a classroom, you can point out to the students which graph is which by looking at the way it's graphed. So I'm going to swap over to the 84 Plus, the 84 CE, and you notice the change in the appearance of the screen straight away because we've got much higher resolution, and I'm going to click into that straight away, and I've just discovered that I was playing around before and I've got them shaded the same colour. That's okay. Let's go and do the same thing again, 2x plus 3, and I won't graph it, I will just go down and put in, where am I, 3x plus 3, and graph that. And because I was playing earlier in the day, you'll notice those are both in the same colour. Notice normally they would default to different colours, but immediately you see the effect of the colour and the finer resolution on the screen. And if we want to go back, and this time let's go down to that second function again and go over there, and this time we get a menu popping up, and I can change both the colour and the appearance of the line if I want to, and so I can use the arrow keys and change that to red. I'm going to leave the appearance of the line alone this time, go down, OK, click on there and graph it, and now I can see the two different functions. They are immediately discernible by their colours. So that's the first advantage of the 84 Plus CE, both the colour and the resolution. And I've used two simple examples there with linear functions. We can type if we can define it and type it in, then basically we can graph it. So let's talk some practicalities about teaching and kids in school. I've had teachers say to me, oh, but I don't like the way it just does it for them. I want kids to think about the scale and draw up appropriate axes. Well, you can do that. You can go to Window, and you can click on the window and go through and define exactly what you want that window to be. John talked about inserting and deleting things before, so let's suppose I want to graph this function from -3 down to or up to 4, and delete that one, and I could work out the Ymax and Ymin that I want, but I'm just going to have a look at the graph and see what difference that does. And you can see that the scale on the x-axis has been altered to the settings that I put into the calculator. If you want a little bit more accuracy, I could go down here and change the X scale, and I might want to make that 0.5 so that my X interval is going up in units of 1/2, and I can do that, and slight change, but just a bit more information for the students to work with.
There was a nice feature, Jim, as you see there. Sorry, Jim, there's a nice feature there you might want to point out to people back at the window. When you're scrolling down, you'll see information appears just below the word normal float and what you were doing before. So when you were scale, people may recognise that it's describing what you're doing. So if you would scroll down to your scale, use your arrow key, and you got to there was one before, keep going there. See a distance between the tick marks and axes? That's a nice feature. Sorry to interrupt there,
Yeah,
Jim,
and it's not something that is just restricted to this. It happens in lots of windows on this current operating system, that you get those prompts at the top of the screen. Okay, we've talked about the window. Sometimes you just wish to do things automatically, and you can go to the zoom options, and I'm not going to use all of these. However, some that you might wish to look at is this option here to zoom square, and I think John started to say this before but never quite clarified. With all these menus, you can arrow down, or they're numbered and you've got numbers, just click on them and go straight to that thing. So you'll notice that it has changed the axes, and what it's attempted to do there is get the units on the x-axis and the units on the y-axis to be the same. So that if I was graphing something like a circle, it would in fact look like a circle. So we might quickly try that, and I'm going to clear that one out and clear that one out and put in just half a circle at this stage, and I'm going to put in the square root of, say, 9 minus x squared, which should give me half a circle if I graph that. And it looks a little bit like a circle. And just for one little interesting thing, if I go back to that and I want to draw the other half of the circle, I could put in the negative and go up and copy that, or retype it, or I'm going to go the long way around, not John's shortcut. I'm going to go to the y variables and just put in y1, so I'll get the negative of y1, and I should get the bottom of my circle there. And it's not too bad, it's looking quite round. And just to show the difference, if I zoom that to the standard screen, the -10 to +10, then you will notice that my circle is looking quite elliptical. Even though it's the same equation, it's because of the changes in the scale. So that's something that the kids have to be aware of when they're graphing with technology, that it's correct, but it's not appearing like we expect it to because of the variation in the scale between the x-axis and the y-axis. One other one that I should mention there, for no other reason that there are more of these that go off the screen. You notice the down arrow there at number 9. So if we go down there, we get that one zoom fit. And if I select that one and press enter, taking a bit of time, didn't do anything to make it any more circular, because what we're doing there is zooming the scale on the y-axis so that it fits in essentially what's shown or defined by the x-axis. And you can see that it's because we've spread out. Phone's ringing in the background. I'm the only one in the office, and it's after hours, but the phone's ringing. Just ignore that if you can hear it, please. Yeah, so those things happen with the calculators, and the kids have to be aware of it. It's very powerful technology, and in some ways I think that sometimes the kids learn more about the mathematics using these than graphing it by hand. A lot of people try and claim it's the other way, but I think the kids really have to understand what's going on with the mathematics to make use of these effectively.
Jim, I was just thinking, Jim, with that zoom fit, that's quite a nice, you could also use that when you're trying to explain domain and range, because, yeah, the y, as you said, the y-axis adjusts according to what you've got on the x-axis, so that may also help students to understand that, especially if they went back to window, they would see what that minimum maximum are on the y.
Exactly, yeah. because if you go back there, you can see that, okay, X-min's gone negative 10 to 10, but for our function there, or two functions there, the maximum Y value is positive 3 and the minimum Y value is negative 3, and so that's what the Y scale has been defined to. So that's what it means in terms of fit, enough to fit in all the Y values of the function without any extras. Okay, where are we heading now and how are we going for time? A couple of quick things to finish off on with graph. Probably not good to do this with the circular graph, so I'm going to go quickly back and clear these and just put in a linear function again to make it easier to see what's going on. 2x. Let's go and make it a quadratic. So type x squared minus 3x minus 5, say, and graph that and see what we've got. And this will give us an opportunity to see, okay, that still had the scale from before, so I could do zoom standard, so go back to the negative 10 to 10 and get a little bit more of the function in there. And that's not a bad representation to have there. We'll leave it there. If I go to trace, then it's probably a little bit hard to see because I'm having trouble getting rid of the taskbar down here on mine, but you can see we've got a point on that function, x equals 0, y equals negative 5, and I can use the arrow keys to move along there and get the readout of various values along there. I could go up there until I get the close to the zeros of the functions, but there is easier ways to do that, and just let me see if I'm getting close there. So if I wanted to find the zeros of the functions, go down there on that calculate button and it will give me a left boundary, and so I'm going to be happy with that as a left boundary, and it's now asking me for a right boundary, so move till it's clearly on the other side of that x-intercept and hit enter and take a guess. And what's a good guess going to be? Let's say 2.5 because I don't want to be obvious and pick the exact answer, and press enter and it will come up with no, I did pick the exact answer, did I? Sorry.
They're good at solving quadratics in your head, Jim.
Yeah, rightio. I wasn't looking at the, I was looking at the boundaries, not actually where it crossed, so not to worry. But you get the idea, and I won't go through all of the functions in there, but you might like to have a look at them. So second function calc, and we can find the minimums, maximums by exactly the same procedure, that is setting a boundary on either side of where we think it is, putting in a guess value, and the calculator will solve numerically to find the minimum, or at least a decimal approximation to the minimum.
Yeah, personally, Jim, I think that's a very powerful key or menu commands under the second calc with all there, so it's a fantastic system of things to do on the TI84.
Exactly, and I think, Rodney, that just about, looking at my running sheet here, just about rounds me out for the night. And if we haven't mentioned it before, second function there, quit, we get back to, whoa.
Or you're just promoting what's happening in Queensland.
I said I was finishing. Okay, no problem.
And John's coming on shortly now for his last part of the evening. And you'll see in Queensland, the March 18, they're having a LEC day. So if you go to the teacher support list, ti.com, and education.ti.com Australia, you'll find more information on that.
So you can see my screen now, Rodney?
Yeah, it's getting there shortly, John, so probably just as a sharing, just waiting time for you to share your screen, and we're getting there. And there you are, you're ready to go, John.
Thank you. Beautiful. Thanks for that, Jim. Like I said, I think that, again, there's so much in the graphing section alone. We could almost run a webinar just on that. So that's a great taster and really covers the main aspects to get people started on that. So thank you, Jim. I was also thinking that sometimes I explained to you that you could press second mem and reset to get students on the same page, but if students do want to, and probably one of the big things is wanting to troubleshoot. So I've just typed in a different graph, and on the 84, and Jim showed you on the Siiii, but everything he showed you on the Siiii works exactly the same on the 84 plus. It looks at times slightly different. The 0 definitely is different, and I'll show you something that's different on here, but you can see that it comes up with an error. Now it gives us a hint where that error is, so we can only press quit. Sometimes it will come up with number 2, go to, and I always tell my students to go to where that error is. If I just go to the Siiii and do the same thing, so I've put something in here already, it gives me a bit more information, so it's a bit like what Rodney was saying about how it offers more. So you can see here, check values in the window, X max, X min, and it's a nice little inequality there. That's pretty nice. So if I go to window, oops, sorry, I've got to press quit first. If I go to window, oh yeah, silly me, I had them the wrong way around. The other thing that students can sometimes do, should have done insert, shouldn't I, is they'll use a takeaway rather than negative. Here again we can see the go to, oh yeah, silly me, negative down here to the negative there and delete that, and now it should graph. Oh, no, error syntax. Right, again we got the go to. By the way, this is all set up. I don't need to think that I don't know what I'm doing here. Before you say anything, Rodney, thank you. And this is a classic thing that some of my students like to do to each other. They like to hide other equations down the bottom. Normally you can't see those. So on the Siiii it will take you to them. On the 84 you just got to scroll down. So there's extra ones down the bottom. So if you then clear that and go back to graph now, all is good. So there's two little troubleshooting points for the graphing screen that are probably useful just to bear in mind for the students and then give them those hints. So I'm now going to finish off by looking at statistics. So I will go into y equals and clear that. And when I have students who are new to the 84 or new to when I introduce these in, I sometimes bring these calculators in with my year 7s. And very funny seeing students with a new piece of technology. They don't approach it like they do with their phones, which is a bit weird. I wish they did with such enthusiasm. But I said, well, what buttons are you going to press for statistics? And eventually we'll get to the point where they're going to press stat, and up here in blue, stat plot. So that makes pretty much sense. So press stat into edit because I want to put some numbers in. And let me just type in some random numbers. Doesn't matter which ones I type in. All right, I can do a few little things with that. Well, let's just go and graph that straight away. So to graph it, students will press graph and they'll go, oh, it's not there. Yeah, well, because you haven't told it to graph anything at the moment. All the plots, so I went to second stat plot, all the plots are off. So I need to turn one of them on. So I go into here and turn it on. Obviously I can't do a scatter graph for one piece of information, but I can, oops. I'll scroll across and I'll choose. There's two types of box plots that we can choose, one with outliers and one without, where it will take the outlier included in the maximum. So I'm going to choose the one with outliers. Now it tells me that it's list 1. That's correct. If I did want to change it to another list, do you see they are in blue here, 2, 3, all the way up. These are the marks for outliers if we do want them, and I'm happy with blue. And if we now go graph, there it is. All right. Following on from what Jim said, I like the students to think about what their window would be. So I would like them to think, okay, I type these numbers in, so what should my min and max be? So personally, I prefer them to do this themselves. However, if they need a fallback, they can go into Zoom, and Zoom stat number 9 will actually adjust the window for them. Again, using the trace that Jim used in graph, if we go to trace, it will tell me the median, the lower quartile, and the minimum. And obviously in this case, they're exactly the same. And I think it's important that we show students box plots that do look like this and get them to think about what is actually going on there. Obviously I haven't chosen a very big data set, so that doesn't help, but we can see that happening there. Another nice little trick we can do if we wanted to, and these again are overlooked, are these two here. So sometimes you may want to sort the data out for various reasons, especially if you wanted them to do a stem and leaf plot. So we can sort ascending list 1. Nothing, it just says it's done here, so nothing's any different here, but if I go back into stats, edit, these numbers are now in ascending order. Nice little feature, and again, if you're doing a box plot, you can actually look at that and go, oh yeah, I can see where those numbers fit in. A very common thing for students to do to get rid of these numbers, well, one is to delete each one, which would take a long time. You get a lot of numbers here, but secondly is to move up to where it says list 1 and press delete. And you'll notice that now we've actually lost that list. And if students keep doing that, they keep losing more and more lists, and they'll come to you and say, oh, I've only got so many lists left, where are my list 1s? So don't fear, go back into stat, and number 5 is setup editor. Again, press enter, it's now done, and those numbers are now back. So we can go up to here and press clear to get rid of them, but you would have also noticed that if I go back into stats, I can actually clear a certain list and choose which list I want to clear. So so I could have done that all on the 84. Everything I can do the same on the 84. I really don't want you to think that at the moment what we're showing tonight is any different. Tomorrow we'll add some extras that the Siiii does. But the color and the better pixels allow us to show a few more things in a bit more detail. So I'm going to stay with the Siiii. Just going to add some numbers here. Different amounts of numbers for now. And I'm now going to go back into stat plot again, because I'm only graphing 1 at the moment. I'm going to graph a second one, so number 2. I'm going to turn it on a box plot, same as before. There we go. And it's not list 1 anymore. It's now list 2. Notice if it was group data, and then I would put that into list 1 and list 2, or list 2 and list 3, and I would change the frequency. So rather than 1 of each, I would change it to the other list. It's not in this case. And when I go graph now, all right, it's put it over the line again because of how we had the window set up before. So we can change it. Again, I can go zoom, stat. Oh, it's left it there. That's interesting. I thought it would have moved it up. Oops. 0 to 7. Let's have a look. There we go. That's much nicer. And again, back to trace. And with the color again, not only does it make it easier for students to see which one they're on, but we can then arrow down and go onto the other box plot. And as you can see, with that system, we can actually have 3 plots on the go at all the same time. So what I may do for the second one is I may change this one, and now I'm going to change it from a box and whisker plot to a bar chart. And I'm also going to make it list 2 as well. Nothing else is different, so they're very much the same. Notice up here I can go a quick way I can go between the two. So I've got both the information the same on each of them. The only difference being that one's a box plot and one's a bar chart. And we can see now that there is the comparison between the two. Nice little feature. Obviously I've only chosen a small sample set, but you get the idea. Trace works exactly the same. Nice little grouping going on here if students need to group the data. And probably leading on from what Jim was saying about the window, and especially X scale. X scale in statistics only impacts on one when we're doing a bar chart. That's because it groups it in that X scale. So we can see, if I just go trace, that it groups it 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, etc. Sorry, 3 to less than 4, and tells you the frequency. So if we go into into window and change that X scale now to 2, this is again a nice thing to talk to the students about. And notice what Rodney said before, coming up here again along the top, press enter. It will now group them differently. So worth bearing that in mind. It's the only one that it impacts on. we'll now, don't forget, in terms of with one piece of data, students would want to actually do some calculations with that. So we go into Stats. This time we're going to go across to Calculate. So we're not drawing anything. We're not editing anything. We're actually calculating something. So go across Calc. And really all that we would be doing on this one, because there's one piece of data that we'll be looking at, is one var stats. Yes, we're looking at this one. That will do me. Don't need to worry about frequency. And calculate. And there we go. Everything comes up that I need. And if I scroll down, not only do I have my mean, some of the x's, sample, standard deviation, population standard deviation, frequency, min, lower quartile, median, all the information's there. The only thing they don't get is mode, which they can get obviously from the histogram. I'll now go back into stat plot. I'll turn the second one off. Back into the first one. I'll leave it on, but I'm going to produce a scatter graph this time. And again, I know I'm going to make an error because, let's see if you know why the error is there. If we had a bit more time, which we're getting a bit short on time, I'll send out a Q&A. Rodney, is this going to graph?
Oh, let me think. You've got one list of data and list 2. Where did list 2 come from, John?
I typed that in. I typed some numbers into list 2. That's why I had the 2 box plots.
So, as a student, you say to the students, give it a go. Before we think about it before we go, then give it a go. And then look for an error message if there is an error message.
There we go. Keeping you on your toes, mate. Yeah, again, on the Siiii, it gives you more information. It will give exactly the same as this on the 84 plus. But yeah, it's saying that the dimensions, they don't match. The lists aren't quite the same. So we'll quit that. And if I go into edit, we can see that there were some numbers missing over here. So no wonder it can't do a scatter plot. I can either scroll down if they were here, but let's say sometimes students have been typing some numbers and they miss one out. A very common thing that you see when they're typing numbers is maybe something like that. And really they're meant to type in 3 and then 2. So they can go 3, back in there, second insert like before, 2. So let's put that one back in. Let's add another one. Oh, who cares? 3. All right, now we're even. So now, if we go graph, there's our beautiful scatter plot. Magic, look at that. Can go between the points if I want to look at the points. And again, what would we want to do with this? Well, we would want to go into stats, across to calculate, and we would want to see what the regression is like. In this case, we're just going to choose lin reg. So linear regression. Number 4, is it list 1 and list 2? Yes, it is. Now, there's the frequency. Well, there's only one of each, so I don't need to worry about that. A new feature of both the 84 plus and the Siiii on the new operating system is that we can store that regression equation. In the past, you didn't have this nice syntax. So I'm going to store that as Y1. So I could go through Jim's way of going through vars, but I'm a fan of these quick keys, so I'm just going to type in Y1 there.
As you're doing that, John, every teacher is different. They prefer different methods, and there's more than one way to do it on the 84 Siiii or the 84 plus, isn't there?
There is, yeah. Yeah. I suppose I always try and say that I'm a lazy mathematician, so if I can do it a quicker way, I will do.
Time efficient, that's what it's called, time efficient.
Thank you. Sorry, that's what I was missing. And as you'll
There's
notice
an implication there, fellas, that I don't like.
Whoops. Moving on. As you can see, the business correlation coefficient is missing on this one. And I mentioned that earlier, that in the mode functionality of this, that we need to make sure that the stat diagnostics is on it. We only need to do that once unless you reset the students' calculators. So it only needs to be done once. So once I've turned it on, that's good to go. And again, like somebody asked earlier, can we scroll up? Yes, we can. Here's the old syntax we're using. So that new is like a template, I suppose. That sort of makes the life easier to put it into. Come back and copy that again. And there's all the information that we'll need. And because I, at the end, stored it as Y1, it's also dumped the equation directly into here for me, which is a nice little feature. And it's graphed it as well. like Jim said, if I didn't want those to be both the same color for some reason, I could change either of them, but I'll change this one. I can come down to the color. There we go. Let's make it red. And there we are. We can also, if we were wanting to compare these to what actually the people got, we could actually go into table. And we can see that at the X value, what the Y value would give us off the graph. It's a nice little comparison. We can scroll both upwards and down wherever we want.
John, while you're there, could you press your Y equals keypad for the audience? Just to remind people that Y1's been stored there, just as a reminder.
Did I not say that?
You did say that, just like to really emphasise it and look at it there as well. Yes, I know you did say that, but just look at there and you, yes.
No, thank you. Also, in table, notice here we can press the plus to change the scale of what the table goes up by. So if you did want to change it to go up rather than by 1 by, say, 0.5, we could actually change that and it will change the table accordingly. So some nice little features, really nice to analyze the graphs, and especially, and I showed it earlier, that we could have all of those happening at the same time, so students can really see what's going on with all the information all on one screen. And that's nice, a nice little function as well.
It is wonderful, isn't it, seeing all the side of the screen there, see all three?
Yeah, really, and with the color now, really quite powerful. Going back to the variables that we talked about earlier, let me just go up and just copy this again. This is a nice little feature as well. That you can see that, yes, as Rodney said, these variables have stored straight away into the Y equals, because that's what I typed in when I did it originally. Let me just show you that again. So I went to Stat, across to Calculate, a linear regression, and we actually stored it, the regression here. So actually what I'll do, sorry, I'll just change my mind. I'll go back and do Calculate. This time I'll do a quadratic. So we'll try and fit a quadratic to it. Still list 1, still list 2, but I'll leave the old regression equation there. This time I'm going to use the quick keys again and choose Y2. We can see we get all the information again, all these variables that are here, and we can see we now have 2 equations in here because I've stored them as separate ones, and they'll also graph now separately as well at the same time, which is a nice little feature. And my last thing, because I find this quite useful to use with students if they want to have the exact values, is those 2 numbers, or those variables that we got. So in this case, for the quadratic, the A, B, and C, we can access those if we want to actually use them. So if we go into VARs, go into number 5, statistics, and across a couple, there's the A, B, C. So we can actually, I didn't take note of what A was now. I think on the, okay, more on the quadratic, I'll look in a second. But if I now go here and press A, there's the actual number that was stored here for the coefficient of x squared. So again, students could use that. If they could keep going back to VARs A, but they may go, you know what, stuff that I want to store it something else, I'll store it as A on my screen here, so that I can use that anytime I want to. So if I now do 5A, like I showed you at the very start, it will impact on that number. And I think I've covered everything that I wanted to on that, Rodney. Are there any questions that have come up?
Not in the last few minutes, no, there hasn't been any questions. So thank you to John and also to Jim. So just a reminder for participants, don't forget to register for the part 2 of this webinar series. And so we have part 2. So John and Jim in the next webinar would be actually downloading, displaying, analysing mathematical images, using TI Connect to upload and download data and images as well, using the link function on the calculator to share information between calculators and build on what has been discussed in today's webinar. And we have the home screen, graphing, statistics, operating system, and much, much more. So I hope the participants tonight register for the part 2 of the information. So just need the ball to come across to me, and I'll be able to actually finalise the webinar tonight, and we'll talk about the
And Rodney, building on that, if people do have questions that they want to know the answer to, then please encourage them to email into TI, and there will be somebody that will respond and give them the answers they need.
Yeah, most definitely, because we had two experts tonight, John and Jim, the JJs, so we called them, and helping us tonight. So if you head to the Texas Instruments Australia website, you'll see this as your home screen, which John was showing earlier before, and you'll notice that in the middle of there is one way of getting there is to click on the webinars, and you'll see the tabs here that we had tonight, part 1. There we are. Don't forget, as I said before, register for part 2 tomorrow night, and you'll see what the John and Jim are doing tomorrow, and doing that. So with tonight's webinar, you'll see another tab up here which says On Demand, and in a few days' time, you will actually see all the recorded webinar and associated resources. And if you're looking for more information, more types of webinars with the 84 and other types of graphics calculators, TI Inspire, you can scroll through and see there you are there. Last year, John, you and Jim must be a good working pair, 29th of October last year, and we go through a whole lot of resources. So please, the participants, could you complete the feedback survey at the conclusion of this webinar, and keep your inbox. You'll see an email with your link to your certificate for tonight. So thank you to Jim and John.
Thanks, Rodney.
Thank you, Jim.
And we hope to see the participants and audience back tomorrow night. So thank you very much and have a good evening. Bye for now.
Good night all.